It is no secret that I am a huge fan of FlyDigi's controllers, with my favorite being the FlyDigi Vader 3 Pro. But now there's a new controller on the block that by far takes the crown of my favorite controller of all time, and it's called the FlyDigi Vader 4 Pro. The Vader 4 Pro takes everything that was amazing about the FlyDigi Vader 3 and either preserves or upgrades it. Oh, and did I mention there's also a pirate-themed limited edition variant of this controller, which we're going to take a look at a little bit later on. By the way, I want to say a big thanks to FlyDigi for sending me the Vader 4 Pro to review, and as always they had no influence over the content of the video or my opinions. Also, I'm happy to say that the Vader 4 Pro will also be available on Amazon, which means easy returns if you find that it's not for you. There are links in the description where you can buy it on Amazon or a little cheaper on AliExpress. And if you're interested in checking this controller out, please do use my links as it does help support the channel. Next to the Vader 3, the Vader 4 has a much more stealthy aesthetic. Gone are the blue and silver accents in favor of this almost completely stealth black and silver look, with just a hint of that blue DNA on the analog sticks. Overall though, the shape is more or less the same, with the same V-shaped accents and LED, the FlyDigi logo up top, and of course those awesome programmable C and Z face buttons. But what immediately sets the Vader 4 Pro apart from its predecessor is of course these adjustable rings around the analog sticks. Just like on the Apex 4 I previously reviewed, these rings allow you to adjust the tension of the analog sticks on the fly with a simple twist. This is an absolutely wild feature of this controller that we'll take a look at later on. FlyDigi's iconic clickety floating D-pad is back as well, with its bowl shape and incredibly clicky crunchy profile. This is easily one of my favorite things about FlyDigi controllers, and it's just as good here as it is on all of the others. The face buttons have made a bit of a change from the FlyDigi Vader 3. They're still the clicky tactile micro switches, but these feel a lot closer to the Apex 3 than they do the FlyDigi Vader 3. Now I know that's kinda hard to describe if you haven't owned all these controllers, but basically these face buttons have more travel and a chunkier click than they did on the Vader 3, which was more of a mousy style of click. The most accurate description I have for these is chunky. They have a very well-defined and noticeable tactile click, followed by a little travel as you push them all the way down, and then they spring back up with almost just as much force. They are extremely satisfying and responsive to use, and they look fantastic with this clear resin effect with the raised up labels inside. It looks fantastic. For being a clicky tactile micro switch, I think the amount of travel you get on these is absolutely phenomenal. It does bear mentioning that the additional C and Z face buttons are just normal clicky micro switches, just like they were on the Vader 3. And the star of the show here is of course the analog sticks. You can see this kind of clear blue plastic around the module which just looks absolutely beautiful, along with FlyDigi's iconic analog stick cap, which is thick and rubbery and chunky, and very grippy. I should also mention that these caps can be removed and replaced with either taller or shorter caps. And then of course there's this sturdy textured wheel around the outside. With just a simple twist of this wheel, you can increase or decrease the tension of the analog stick. At its absolute minimum, the stick moves with basically no resistance, and when pinged back to the center it will wobble on its axis a few times. When tightened all the way, the analog sticks have significant resistance, and the spring back is much sharper. I absolutely loved this feature on the FlyDigi Apex 4, but on that controller you actually had to remove the faceplate and use a screw or a tool to tighten the screws. But here on the Vader 4 Pro, it's the perfect solution, because these thick, grippy dials stay out of the way while you're playing, but are super easy to access if you do want to change the tension. The tension of an analog stick is not something that I would usually pay much attention to, but while you're playing a game you can actually adjust it on the fly. For example, I was playing Combat Master on Android, an FPS game, and I found that I just constantly wanted to up the resistance on the left stick, as in the movement stick, but loosen it on the right stick so that I could aim faster. And it's really cool when you're playing any type of game and you realize that you can just tweak this controller as you go. You can just tweak the sticks to exactly where you want them. Honestly, this is a feature I wouldn't necessarily say is absolutely needed, but it's definitely welcome now that it's here. And I really think that this adjustable dial design is the perfect way to implement this feature. It's much easier than the Apex 4, and really allows for creativity as you play. Moving on, another returning feature from the Vader 3 Pro is the incredible clicky analog triggers. On the back of the controller, you're going to see these two slide switches. And these switches change the trigger from a full analog trigger with all the pressure sensitivity you could expect, to a fully digital micro switch trigger. That's right, when you flip these switches up, it actually raises a clicky micro switch into the path of the trigger. And this is much different from other controllers that have trigger stops. Usually the trigger stop will just limit the distance that the analog trigger can move. But in the case of the Vader 4 Pro, and of course the Vader 3 Pro before it, the stopper actually gives you a fully digital micro switch clicky trigger, which is just fantastic and best in class. If you're using this controller on the Switch or on an FPS game or in any other scenario that doesn't need analog triggers, you're getting the best possible type of trigger. It's clicky, tactile, easy to press with minimal travel. But on the other hand, in scenarios where you need a full analog trigger, you just flip the switches down and you get just that. Just like on the Vader 3 Pro, this is the best possible combination of inputs for the triggers. This is a feeling that you really can't beat. It makes regular trigger stops feel awful by comparison, and the triggers themselves are perfectly shaped and perfectly clicky or perfectly pressured. Honestly, everything about these triggers is essentially perfect, and I absolutely love them. And thank goodness that FlyDigi didn't abandon this excellent feature from the Vader 3. Oh, and as for the bumpers, I never really know what to say about them. They're clicky and they're perfect and they're great. A few more of the features that this controller offers is compatibility with a 2.4 GHz dongle, Bluetooth or the Nintendo Switch, along with 6 programmable macro keys. There are 4 on the back here and the C and Z buttons on the front. This controller can also be used directly with a wire for zero latency gameplay. It also supports FlyDigi's already existing charging dock, along with the mobile phone holder which just goes into the slot at the top. And of course, on top of all of that, this controller features extensive customization through the FlyDigi Space Station software. I have actually covered this software a ton in previous videos, and for a taste of what you can get from that software, I recommend checking out my Apex 4 review. It is the best in class software customization features on any controller ever, and I do mean that very sincerely. If there is absolutely anything that you dislike about the way that this controller behaves, outside of physical aspects I guess, you can modify it in the controller software. That includes analog input curves, remapping any button to any other button, and even a way to enable quick switching between 4 onboard profiles. Once again, this is best in class software customization. Of course, one of my favorite ways to customize a modern controller is with gyroscope, and I'm happy to say that the Vader 4's gyroscope is fantastic. And you can set it up to work universally on any game and any platform. Except the Switch of course, because that already has gyroscope. I love to set the Vader 4 up so that when I'm holding the left trigger or the right trigger, the gyroscope is enabled. That means that in a game like Combat Master, I can have ultimate accuracy whether I'm firing from the hip or aiming down sights. And this genuinely makes such a massive difference to the game. The additional accuracy you get from a feature like this is really unparalleled, and it will actually make you perform significantly better in the game, at least in my experience. So I'm guessing by now that you understand that I love the FlyDigi Vader 4 Pro. And I have to say, this has replaced the Vader 3 Pro as my favorite controller of all time, because it's essentially the exact same controller, but just with more. But I do have a couple of very minor dislikes on this controller. I don't really want to call them dislikes though, I'd rather just call them considerations. The first consideration is noise, and I've said this about all of the FlyDigi controllers I've reviewed. These controllers are, well, really noisy. They have a clickety, crunchy D-pad, which might actually be the loudest D-pad on the market. And then there's clicky face buttons as well, and clicky triggers if you want them. All in all, it's just a very noisy controller, and that just might not be for everyone. I personally don't mind it, and nor do the people around me, so it's not an issue. But if you want a quiet controller, then this isn't it. And the other consideration is that it is actually substantially heavier than the Vader 3 Pro. And that's actually the only thing I prefer about the Vader 3 Pro. Something I really liked about it is it was so lightweight, it was just easy to grab and play. But the Vader 4 Pro is definitely more hefty. Understandably so of course, but still, like I said, a consideration. And the last consideration here might be a little indulgent, but it's basically that this is kind of an endgame controller. I'm really not sure where FlyDigi can go next with this. It is so incredibly good in every way that I literally cannot think of any further improvement. But to be fair, I didn't really think about analog stick adjustment either. Maybe next trigger pressure adjustment? I'm not really sure. Now before I give you my very obvious summary, let's take a look at this very special, very limited Assassin's Creed Black Flag Special Edition. Why FlyDigi decided to base their special edition on a 11-year-old game is anyone's guess, but I am super happy they did. In case you don't know, I am a full pirate, and I love collecting pirate-themed everything. Actually, this is the third pirate-themed FlyDigi controller I own, which is kind of awesome. As you can see, this design is absolutely sublime. It's a kind of treasure map white color, with both black accents, along with these copper ruby red details, along with these printed details of various islands in the Caribbean, such as Hispaniola. And of course, this compass detail in the center of the face buttons. A pirate compass on my controller? And then of course you've got the pirate skull and all that other stuff, which you would obviously have. I don't need to tell you that this looks absolutely stunning. And if you want to pick one of these up for yourself, you need to act fast. This is an incredibly limited edition run of this controller, and there are either going to be 1,000 or just 500 units of this special edition available. There are links to it in the description box below, so if you're an Assassin's Creed fan, a Black Flag fan, a pirate fan, I sincerely recommend you pick this up before it's gone. So that's the FlyDigi Vader 4 Pro. There's not much more I need to say. This is a perfect controller, and it comes with my highest possible recommendation. If you're looking for an endgame controller that works with Android, iOS, Steam, and Switch, and you don't mind it being a tad noisy, you cannot get any better than the FlyDigi Vader 4 Pro. This is an absolute, total home run of a controller.